How do you solve a conflict and build bridges? I'm not talking about who's right, or who has the loudest voice, or who walks away first. I'm talking about really solving it, finding your way back to each other. Not because you agree, but because you refuse to stay disconnected. Sometimes, solving a conflict means compromise. Sometimes it means taking a step back. Sometimes it means standing your ground, but doing it without burning the bridge you're standing on. And sometimes, it just takes one person with the courage to say, let's come back to the table. Let me give you an example. In the Netherlands, there was this independent media platform. It started raw, honest, from a car, one man, one mission, telling stories no one else would tell. The movement grew fast, the following exploded. And with it came attention, and eventually investors. But more structure brought more tension, more control, more rules. Until the founder, the heart of it all, stepped away. Disagreements followed. Staff walked out. The site went offline. The screen went black. And then, one man did something no one expected. He walked into the empty studio, turned on the lights, and sat in front of the camera. Alone. Not to blame. Not to beg. But to invite. Let's do one more broadcast, he said. Together. For the people who believed in us. With a mediator if we need one, but with each other. And at the end, with his voice breaking, he looked into the lens and said, "Dear shareholder, please be there. Founder, thank you. I hope you come too, because reconciliation is a duty." And in that moment, he didn't just reopen the channel, he reopened the conversation. Because the goal isn't always to agree. Sometimes it's simply to find a way to move forward without leaving each other behind. Let's be honest. We disagree on a lot these days. Big stuff. Small stuff. Immigration. Some say, we need to help. Others say, they need to leave. And before you know it, people are throwing around words like racist, naive, extreme, dangerous. Vegan or not, money or meaning, fly on holiday or save the planet, raise your kids this way or that way. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone thinks theirs is the one that makes the most sense. But here's what we forget. Most disagreements aren't really about the surface. They go deeper. They hit something inside us. What we value, what we fear, what we believe about the world. So, let's talk about something uncomfortable. Not politics, not religion, not who's right or wrong. Let's talk about what happens when two people see the world completely differently. You're in a conversation, and suddenly you feel it. That shift, that tightening in your chest, that voice in your head whispering, they don't get it, they don't get me. And from that moment you stop listening. Not because you're stubborn, but because something deeper is at stake. Because this isn't just about the topic. It's about your convictions, what you've lived, what you believe, what you value. And the same goes for the other person. See, most people think disagreement is about opinions. It's not. It's about the system behind those opinions. The deeper layers, the things we rarely say out loud, like, I believe the government always lies. I think people should earn their place. I don't trust people who believe in that. I was raised to think this was wrong. We don't say those things, but we argue from them. So what do? How do we stay in the conversation without turning it into a battlefield? Here's the first thing. Not all opinions are created equal. Some are about personal preference, taste, sound, style. You like spicy food? I don't. You love techno? I'd rather not. Fine, no problem. That's not about truth. That's about you. But others go deeper. They're about how the world should be, how people should behave. What is right? What is dangerous? What is sacred? And those opinions, they live in your nervous system. They come from your upbringing, your pain, your history. the things you've seen, and the things you've been protected from. So no, you're not going to change someone's mind with a few clever arguments, because you're not debating facts. You're brushing up against identity. So what now? You build the bridge where it matters, not in the topic, but in the underlying conviction. You say, help me understand where that belief comes from. You say, I hear how important this is to you. Can I ask why? You don't ask to trap them. You ask to connect. Because when people feel heard, they soften. And when you feel heard, you do too. You don't need to agree. You just need to listen until you both remember that behind every opinion is a human being trying to make sense of their world. So next time it gets heated, pause, zoom out, ask yourself, is this really about the topic? Or are we both just defending who we are? And maybe you don't need to convince. Maybe you don't need to be right. Maybe the power is in staying present, even when you disagree. Because that is how bridges are built. So let's say you managed to stay calm. You stayed in the room. You listened. You looked for the deeper belief behind the opinion. You found a little common ground. Now what? Because here's the frustrating part. Even when you've made that connection, even when the facts are on your side, even when it's clear as day to you, they still don't change their mind. You show them studies. You explain it rationally. You stay calm. You stay kind. And still, nothing shifts. Why? Because facts don't move people. Stories do. Belonging does. Emotion does. We like to think we're logical creatures, but we're not. We're emotional first, rational second. We don't believe what's true. We believe what fits, what feels safe, what protects our identity. If a new fact threatens that identity, it's rejected. Not because it's false, but because it's dangerous to their sense of self. That's why you can't win an argument with evidence alone. Because it's not about truth. It's about trust. It's about loyalty to your own story. And here's the trap we fall into. We think if we just explain it better, they'll see the light. They won't. Not unless they feel safe enough to loosen their grip. Not unless they sense you're not here to humiliate, but to understand. And the moment they feel attacked, even subtly, their brain isn't processing logic. It's in survival mode. So what does work? You meet them in their world. You step into their shoes. You get curious, not about the topic, but about the why behind the belief. Because when someone believes something deeply, even if it sounds outrageous to you, there's always a reason. It's not stupidity. It's not laziness. It's history. It's pain. It's wiring. You don't have to agree with it. But if you ever want to be heard, you have to honor that it exists. And when the connection is strong enough, when they feel seen, not judged, you might notice a shift. Not all at once, not immediately, but something opens. And that is the space where real change begins. So if facts don't work, if logic alone doesn't move people, and if real change begins with connection, then here's the next question. How do we navigate a world full of differences without losing ourselves or each other in the process? Because let's be honest, we don't just disagree about facts. We disagree about tone, about timing, about method, about style. And that brings me to something few people realize. We're not all wired the same way when it comes to how we communicate or how we respond to new ideas. Some people are what I call matchers. They seek similarity. They build on what's already there. They say things like, I agree. That makes sense. I feel the same. Others are mismatchers. They challenge. They question. They hear your idea and immediately say, yes, but Gurk, what if we flipped it? Both are valuable. Both are needed. But when we confuse one for resistance or the other for lack of creativity, We miss the bigger picture. In a polarized world, where change is fast and opinions are louder than ever, we need both energy and empathy. We need fire and flow, disruption and diplomacy. Innovation often comes from the mismatcher, the one who dares to question, to push, to say what no one else is saying. But harmony? That comes from the matcher, the one who brings the pieces together and says, let's find the part where we agree. And here's where it gets powerful. You don't have to choose. You're not just a matcher. You're not just a mismatcher. You can switch. You can adapt. You can feel when a situation needs challenging and when it needs calming. That's not manipulation. That's maturity. That's real leadership. Because the strongest communicators aren't the ones who always have the best ideas. They're the ones who know when to speak, how to listen, and which energy to bring to the table. And let me say this, if you're someone who usually matches, if you're the peacemaker, the harmonizer, the one who holds the room together, you have more power than you think. And if you're someone who mismatches, who challenges, disrupts, who sees patterns others miss, don't tone yourself down, but choose your moment. Because influence doesn't come from being right. It comes from being real, from knowing your own default and choosing when to shift, when to build, when to question, when to lead, and when to step back. That's how you build bridges without losing your edge. That's how you create movement without creating unnecessary resistance. So no, conflict isn't always a failure. And no, we're not here to agree on everything. That's not the point. Disagreement is part of life. It's part of growth. It's part of being human. But what is a choice is how we meet it. With curiosity instead of assumption. With humility instead of ego. With connection instead of control. Because real change, real understanding, real movement doesn't happen when we avoid friction. It happens when we use it. Without friction, nothing shines. And without tension, there's no progress. So let's stop trying to win every argument. Let's stop building walls with our certainty. Let's start building bridges. Not by avoiding the hard parts, but by leaning into them together. Because some conflicts aren't the problem. They're the opening.